Hey folks, this is section 3.2. We will have already begun this section hopefully in class, but there's one little piece of this that I'd like to go over so that you are able to watch this video and be able to go through it at a pace all on your own. You can pause, you can rewind, you can take notes, which I would strongly recommend, and have your notes done when you come to class on this particular piece of section 3.2. Before I get to what I'd like to cover in section 3.2, just a reminder of something that you would have learned back in Math 102, and that is talking about the quadratic function versus the vertex form. You'll notice that I have both of these pieces right here, quadratic function ax squared plus bx plus c, and the vertex form is something that we are familiar with according to what we covered back in chapter 2 with the squaring parent, who are now is going to be called the quadratic parent. So what I'd like for you to do is in your notes on section 3.2, if you would please just go down until you get to the page that has the how-to list for completing the square. Completing the square, again, is something that you would have done in Math 102, so hopefully this is just a review. But I have this how-to list here, and many teachers teach this slightly differently. We all really do essentially say the same thing, but we use a bit of a different phraseology, per se, to be able to explain this in our own personal methods. So completing the square, the first thing that you're going to want to do is you want to get rid of the a. And getting rid of the a here is simply, if you'll look at number 8, getting rid of the a would be getting rid of the -1. Whereas in number 30, getting rid of the a would mean getting rid of that number 2 that is out in front. You want to divide both sides by a to get rid of it. And then the other thing that you're going to want to do is you want to move the constant down the line and ignore it temporarily. Often, I don't just move it down the line, I'll move it to the other side. And just ignore it for the time being. After that, you're going to want to take half of your b term. You want to square that number, whatever you got when you took half of your b term, you'll want to square it. Then you'll want to add it and subtract it. Commonly, instructors will say that you'll want to add it to both sides. And that is also a possibility. After that, you'll factor the trinomial. Then you'll add the leftover constants, and then you'll multiply a back and give it back to both sides. So if I were you, I would have this list out in front of you while I go through number 8, and we'll be referring back to it. So the first thing that we want to do here is we want to get rid of that -1 that's out in front. We want to divide on both sides by the -1. So in order to divide on both sides by -1, that's going to end up being p of x divided by -1 is equal to x squared, that's the first term divided by -1, minus 3x, because you're dividing every single thing by -1. And then if I were you, I would leave some space here and go ahead and continue dividing by -1, so that's going to be a -10. So this is dividing by -1 on both sides. Number 2 said that you want to move the constant down the line, and you'll notice that that's exactly what I did here. I moved the constant down the line so that we could just ignore it for the time being. Step number 3 says to take half of the b term. You'll notice that the b term here is a -3. When I take half, I don't care about the negative right now. When I take half of a 3, I know a lot of you will want to say that that's 1.5. That's much more difficult to think of. When you take half of 3, just call it 3 halves. Take that number, slap it over the number 2, and you've got 3 halves. So we're going to take half of 3, which is 3 halves, and then we want to square that number. So over here on the side, if I take 3/2 and I square it or multiply it by itself, you multiply the tops, you multiply the bottoms, and you're going to end up with 9/4. So that's step number 4. You want to square that number. Step number 5 says that you should add and subtract that number at the same time. And that's what the blank is for. So I'm going to add 9/4 and I'm going to subtract 9/4. So now what we have here is we're all the way to step number 6 in our list. And step number 6 says that we should factor the trinomial. Now, tri, we know, means 3. So we're just looking at these 3 terms right here. And if I want to factor that trinomial, there's a shortcut to doing this. You know how to factor from Math 101 and Math 102, but there is a shortcut for this. So I'm going to use the shortcut. Let's go ahead and copy p of x divided by -1. If I factor this trinomial, I am going to end up having a binomial squared. This will be a binomial times itself. So what I'm looking at here is always use the variable. So that's an x. Always use whatever this sign was. So that's a minus. And then my number, go back. Remember in our list how we got half of the b term, and half of our b term was 3/2. That's the number that's going to go right in here. Now at this point, we have factored our trinomial, which was step number 6. Step number 7 says that we should add the leftover constants. And this is where I want to add my -9/4 and my -10. So what I will do with this is I'll get a common denominator. Yes, your calculator can do this for you, but I'm going to get a common denominator, and I'm going to change -10 into -40 over 4, because 40 divided 4 is 10. So now what I need to do is I'm going to combine -9/4 and -40/4, and that's going to give me a -49/4. We're getting very close here. Notice that our vertex form is really starting to emerge. And so what we're going to do next, the very last step, is that we want to multiply a on both sides. Remember, our a was that -1. So let's pass the -1 back over to the right side by multiplication. So we'll have p of x. That's going to be left alone now since that -1 is going to be multiplied by the other side. Multiply your -1 by the quantity first. That's going to look like a negative or a -1 times the quantity x minus 3/2, quantity squared. No, you are not allowed to distribute there. And then go ahead and pass that -1 out to your fraction. So a -1 times a -49/4 is going to be a positive 49/4. And now you have taken your quadratic equation, which is what we were given originally, and you've turned it into a vertex form. And once I have that vertex form, then I'm able to do what I need to do. In this case, let's see, are there any directions here? I'm supposed to write it as vertex form, and I'm supposed to graph it afterwards. So at this point then, I'm able to see what my vertex is, and I'm able to get a graph of that as well.